what is the process for figuring out, like for actually figuring out the physical height? If they say, okay, we want you to go 1/4 inch above existing, do you guys just laser out the room that you're in, or do you laser out everything that's related to the room that you're in?
Everything, because I've already seen between the vestibule and the front of the store.
Yep.
Where you look through the window, you'll see 2 different elevations.
Yep.
Depending on where you set your tripod up.
Westbrook.
So if you do a vestibule, start the vestibule. This is where we came up a long time ago with me fucking up fascia, is put some reference marks.
Yep.
And come out the store, put a reference mark. That most likely will stay there, not like when I put one on the floor to clean it, cleans them off.
So then I guess for me, the first night that you're there, if you're the first crew and you're the first crew to put up wall protection, whatever you do is going to dictate what everybody that comes behind you also has to do, right? Because for me, one of the things that drives me absolutely insane is when I walk into a store and I look in the vestibule and I see 2 different heights of wall protection. And the reason it pisses me off is because I was the fucking dumbass who put 4-foot plywood on top of an 8-inch curb, not realizing that once you get inside of the store, there's no curb, and I felt like a complete moron, right? So then I learned that that's a thing that you got to look out for, and you don't make that mistake again, right? Like, nothing I'm telling you guys to not do isn't something I haven't fucked up myself already, right? There are situations where it says specifically in the drawings to have different heights for wall protection. We do run into that on occasion. But for me, if everything's meant to be the same height in the store, what that height is irrelevant, right? If they say it's supposed to be 48 inches off the finished floor, well, from where, right? Because the floor is going to be going like this. If you're near a structural column, it's always going to have a little buildup to it, right? So if you start at a structural column and you go 48 inches up, by the time you laser out and you get over to your low point, you might be at 52 inches, right? So that number is not really that important. What's important is where are we going to put it and why are we going to put it there? So we know it needs to be at 48 inches there or thereabouts, right? Same with fascia. They'll say be X off the finished floor. Well, you know, you can measure it at one point here, you go 100 feet down to the other end and you measure it, and then you run the laser and you're 2 inches out on level, right?
You guys did get to experience one of the worst islands I've ever seen.
Yeah.
For elevations, because I've never seen it as bad as what these guys came up with. And I went and looked at how bad it was out from one corner to the other.
Yep.
I've never seen that in all the stores I've done.
No, isn't that Westbrook?
I think so, yeah.
So we got to be level. That's all there is to it. If you're not level when you're running fascia and you're not level when you're running wall protection, making our seams, cutting our 45s, all of that becomes an absolute nightmare. You do not want to have to be doing compound miters on the outside of a 45 on an island. You'll be there for three nights cutting and cutting and cutting and cutting, and it's still not going to fit properly, right? And even if you do manage to get it to fit properly, it's going to look like shit. Anyone who knows anything about what the fascia is supposed to look like is going to walk in and look at it and go, something's not right.
I think we tried that once and it didn't.
No.
It looked nice. The miter was nice, but it didn't work.
No. It's just a huge pain in the ass. So we always are attempting, like the whole strategy with the spreadsheet and all of that is to give you parts that allow you to get to level, plumb, and square, right? So when you put your step-ups in, right, normally the step-ups, we follow the coolers. So if the coolers are going in and out like this as they go down, we follow them, but you can level those step-ups. So now you've taken one of the variables out. If the cooler's tipping forward, tipping backward, here, there, and everywhere, it doesn't matter. You level your step-ups. Now you've got a level surface to work off of. Now when you go to put your decks and your brackets on, you pull your decks out, you do your string line. Now you're level, but you're also straight, right? Now when it comes time to put the fascia on, you put your laser up and you're shooting a level line and you're following that. You've got a perfectly plumb face on, like plumb and I guess straight, right? So it's going like that. It's not doing this. It's not doing this, right? Well, it might do that a little bit, but it doesn't matter.
Since we started the step-ups, because I never used to be like that with loblaws even. Everything followed the elevations. Then they changed everything to keep the elevation. I know we did try this once. I did. We tried to run the step-ups with the cooler, or not with the cooler, but run it
straight. Yeah.
That does not work.
Nope.
It has to follow the cooler, and then your string line for your fascia is straight.
So what it means,
you don't see, it's way better.
Yeah, what it means is your overhang might be different. You might have 4.5 inches on one end, you might have 2 inches on the other end. That's just how it's going to be, right? Unless they're trying to fit lights in there and they need a specific minimum dimension, then you would have to make the small end the minimum dimension, and the other end, if this is 4, this is now going to be 6.5 or whatever it's going to be, right?
On Mosier, when they put lights in, that's the biggest thing you measure. Run your string line, you have to measure all the way down, probably every 8 feet at least.
Yeah.
Because we did have a couple guys that did the big run in Superstore, which is the health and beauty that goes into baby to home stuff. Long run. And the electrician came along right in the middle, can't fit his lights in. They did a nice job, it was fucking straight as hell.
Looked good.
They had to take it down, move it, and they actually put that up in one night the second time.
Yeah. So that's specific to Loblaws. We have the opportunity there because of their details that we can work it out and make it so that it works, right? And we can adjust the height of the step ups. We can adjust all of that stuff to give you what you need if you give us the correct information. When we're dealing with Sobe Safeway, obviously metal fascia, it's a completely different deal. Totally different set of constraints, right? So then it's a different strategy for how we do the installation. But again, it basically has to be level and plumb. Otherwise, when you try and go around the corners, nothing lines up and it becomes an absolute nightmare, right? So, we got to start out with level and plumb. For me, like when you guys went to Leduc, I think you spent the night going around taking pictures of everything and taking measurements, did you not?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how come I didn't get the same thing for Cardston?
I wasn't the first one.
Yeah, I know. And so this is the thing about best practices, right? Like, what did I say after you loaded all those photos? I sent an email out or put something on the group chat that's like one of the most useful things you guys can do for me in the office is send me those photos so I can actually see the coolers and see what we're dealing with. Because then I got a visual sort of representation of what the different types of coolers are, what the transitions look like. I can start trying to solve some problems for you guys before you have problems, right? So for me, I think when we start doing these job tasks, we shouldn't be going directly into work in any one area. What we should be doing is starting to laser out the store and making a plan for how we're going to proceed, right? And it should be the responsibility of the first crew on site to do that. And they're basically going to dictate what everybody that follows them does because they're the ones that set it up. So like Jim was saying, we should not only laser out in the main vestibule. Okay, laser out in the main vestibule, get yourself a piece of green tape. How do we mark a wall? Like for studs or for a reference height? Like how should we be doing that? Do we use pencil on the painted wall?
No.
Do we put a piece of painter's tape and then use a pencil?
Yep.
No. Nope. Sharpie. Ask me how I know. Because a pencil will actually leave like a little indentation, right? And I'm on the job site, I've like put up all my little tape, put my lines on with my pencil, thought I was doing everything right, peel all my tape and there's all these little marks you can see. And I got some fucking site guy that's got nothing better to do than bust my balls. And here he is telling me that he's gonna back charge me because the painter is gonna have to fill it and blah, 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 right? So best practice is use painter's tape and use a Sharpie because a Sharpie won't leave a little mark in the back there, right? So I would say use a Sharpie on painter's tape, make a reference mark so you know that you're comfortable that your height is good in the area that you're working in. Go inside the store. Take that line, transfer it across to the next section and see what you run into. Right? Because what you might find is that line that you've chosen that works in the vestibule doesn't work across the front of the store. Maybe that line is, a 1/4 inch too high and it's catching the bottom of every single light switch in the entire store. And all you need to do is drop your fascia by 1/2 inch and you're going to clear all of that and save yourself a whole pile of work, right? You don't know that unless you actually go and look. Right? You also don't know if you've got any really bad dips in the floor as you're going along if you don't go and look, right? So for me, the way I think we should be doing wall protection is we should be finding the highest spot in the floor, right? So wherever the high spot is, basically set your board on the floor at the high spot, right? That's where you would get your elevation, right? Now, sometimes we might need to go a little lower. If we've got plywood, it's 48, and they want us to be at 49, then you go at 49 from the high spot. Then as you're lasering out, you're always going to be at 49. That gap at the floor will get bigger and smaller, right? It might be 1 inch here, it might be 2 inches here, it might be 5 inches, like who knows, right? It's gonna do whatever it's gonna do. But our level line is where it is. If you just arbitrarily pick a spot on the floor and set your laser line, if that's the low point, you're gonna get across to a point where you've actually gotta start cutting out the bottom of the plywood because there's a hump in the floor. And if you don't, everything is getting pushed up and you don't have the room to go up, right? So there needs to be a little bit of a thought process. There needs to be some checking of where the high point is, and that's how you figure out where you're working from, right? With fascia, it's almost the exact opposite. You have to start at the low point and then laser out from the low point, figure out what you're doing, and then figure out the absolute minimum height you can get the fascia up to so that everything works, right? Because you don't want to be jacking it higher and higher and higher in the air. What's your opinion on that?
No, that's exactly how it is.
Yeah.
It's the only way it is.
Yeah.
It's one of my first mistake I did in the cold stone. I said the first measurement.
Yeah.
I take the highest one, so there's a
Yeah. But you have to know, right? And even so, like for me, I allow extra time for setup of island coolers because when I used to do island coolers, I would laser one side out and I would put witness marks on either end, and I would, you know, make sure that I wasn't going to catch the doors and that everything looked good. I'd figure out what level worked on that one side. Just arbitrarily pick a side, right? Figure out what level worked on that side. Then I would literally take the laser and I would go around and I would transfer that line, and I would go all the way around and make sure that that elevation was going to work on all 4 sides. 9 times out of 10, it doesn't, right? 9 times out of 10, you get halfway around on the other side, you're like, oh shit, I'm catching the door, I'm too low. I got to raise everything up by 3/4 of an inch, right? And then, but if you don't do that, if you just start on the one side and start working your way around, then you're like, oh no, I got to cheat it up here to make the door work. And then when you finally get around the corner, you got one board that's here and one board that's here, and you're like, well, how do I make that 45 look good? It's impossible. You can't, right? The laser's your best friend. And like 99.9% of the time, it will tell you whether it's going to work or not. And if you've gone through and done all of the legwork, you don't have that stress of, oh, I don't know, is this gonna work out when I get to the end? You already know it's gonna work out. You already know because you got a plan, and you can just flow through the night working, right?
Actually, I just want to say quick about all these tools about pack out, bringing the cart in, leaving tools in the van. I always got the plan, prep, have patience. When you do your planning and your prepping, in the winter time, I'll tell you right now, batteries should go in, should be opened up, get ready to charge. They got to warm up. The lasers, they got to warm up because sometimes the gimbal in them, they got a little bit of self-leveling, and sometimes they're cold.
They get stuck.
You just go set it up.
Yeah.
It could be like this, and you don't know it, and then you run it later, going, well, what the fuck did I do? Same with the nailer. The nailer doesn't like working when it's frozen either.
Yeah.
That's the 3 main boxes that I know have to, you know, you like them to be warm because they work 100%.
Yeah, they work a lot better when they're warm. So then what's the process for putting laminate on? Because we just send a teeny tiny little cordless router with you guys, right? So like for me, you do the bare minimum of routing possible, right? Like if you're a beginner, yeah, okay, you want to try and put it above the backer and then go through and trim because you think that's the fastest way and that it's less likely to make a mistake that way, but it's really not.
The way I was doing it for a good 4 years on the lawnmowers, no frills. We were starting our first sheet off in a corner, running the laser, fitting it. As long as that's plumb, your other pieces, if they're cut straight, should go nice, and you do have barely anything to cut or barely anything to bury. Because sometimes I've seen the laminate too low and you try and put that 2-way tape on, it doesn't work.
Yep.
It's hitting MDF, it's not touching the laminate.
You got about 1/8 of an inch,
Yeah.
right? So like I used to just,
slap shit up and the corners out, it starts going uphill or downhill no matter what, all the time.
yeah, I just,
One piece, it works nice.
yeah, I just had a little jig, right? Just like the guys that do finished casing and all that around doors, they all have a little jig so that they get their proper reveal. I just had a little jig, 1/8 of an inch. Just make some witness marks, some little lines across the top of your board, line the laminate up to the lines, and away you go. That's how I used to do it. And then there's no trimming. There's no fucking around at all, right? Like
by rights, if your first piece goes on and you ran a laser, everything should be square and plumb.
exactly. And if you did the first one right to the witness marks, you use witness marks for every other one after that. But basically what you're doing is you're lining up to the butt joint, make the butt joint consistent, tight if you can. And then as you're going out, you can look at your witness marks. And if you're a millimeter down when you get to the far end, you know that you didn't line up quite right. And then it's a lot easier to make up a millimeter over 8 feet on the next board than it is to continue on, and oh, now I'm 3/4 of an inch low. What do I do? Right? Like if you need some reference points to know if you're getting yourself in trouble or not. If you have no reference points and you're just slapping shit up and hoping for the best, you're not going to find out until it's too late that you screwed yourself, right? And that's where the time just disappears on the job site. It's when you did something wrong that you didn't account for. I mean, obviously nobody accounts for doing something wrong, but you know what I mean. The time to do something a second time isn't included in our schedule, right? So it's better to spend a half an hour giving yourself some reference points, doing it, planning it out, making sure everything's going to work properly, right? Because that half an hour is included in our schedule, right? Or even an hour or 2 hours as the case may be. And then now you know with some confidence that you can move efficiently through your night's work and that it's all going to work out in the end, right?
I was actually taught that my first job here, Saskatoon Safely, because we didn't have all these cordless tools. We didn't have a router. I didn't even own a cordless router.
Yeah, we had corded routers because that's all there was.
But it was a brand new job and the power box was way near the back for everybody. We had 2 cords running and the only place Fillmore would let us work is the front vestibule because of our dust. You know, the little bit of cutting we were doing, even with the Fez tool, which I didn't even know about at first.
Yep.
And there was a big, huge corridor that went all the way down into the mall. Whole eating area, going all the way around the front of the store we did. And yeah, that's the way Kyle showed me is, now we didn't do any trimming. It was all 5-foot piece of land, but
yeah,
it was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely don't want to trim if you don't have to, because A, it creates a huge mess. B, all the little trimming pieces are going to end up in your eyeball at some point in time. Then you're going to the hospital, right? Like phenolic resin is the worst. You get a little piece of that in your eye, it's bad news.